coming back to where we were, there's been the argument is that schools must prepare people for work because there's been a knowledge revolution, which means that the nature of work has changed, number one, which means that we need updated 3 R's. We need to have higher order thinking skills, which means in number three, that we need more formal schooling. Now, this, of course, and this is why he calls it the education gospel. This, of course, is good news for education. Because what they're saying now is that education is going to solve the problems of the country. Education is going to mean that we can bridge the gap between school and work, right? If we give more people education, and if we give people more education, then they will be able to occupy the jobs, because lots of people can't do the jobs that they traditionally were doing. And they're saying that if we give them an education, then they'll be able to fill the jobs and they will become more productive. This is the human capital theory. They will become more productive. They will, and they will be able to find a job because they now have education. So that's the theory. That's what the gospel is. You know, so they say this is the good news. For those of you who into the gospel, gospel means good news, right? So this is the good news of education. They're saying this is the good news of education. And so, just to summarize, he's making the same point. There's three things you can see that line there. There's been technological change, there are new forms of work organization, and there's international competition. So we're not just competing with people here, we're competing with people in other countries as well. Right? Both our businesses and our workers are competing with people in other countries. So to make the same point, so because it's technological change and jobs are changing all the time, people need to do lifelong learning. Because there are new forms of work organization, so work is changing all the time, and you don't necessarily have a job permanently. You must learn a variety of skills so you can change jobs. Right? And international competition, and you need also soft skills so that you can learn how to become independent and develop initiative. Because it's international competition, that's in the wrong place. There should actually read, there are now a need for greater levels of education because we're competing with somebody else. So we're competing with people in India, we're competing with people in China, we're competing with, to an extent, people in Britain and America. So jobs are going to shift to places where they can find greater education. Right? And so that's why people started to say back in 97, 98, so Tito Mboweni, when he was still Minister of Labour at that time, was saying we need a skills revolution. If we're going to keep up with the rest of the world, we need a skills revolution. They were saying the same thing in America 5 years before that. They were saying the same thing in Britain in the 1980s. Right. Everybody's saying in the whole world, they're saying we need a skills revolution. Now, of course, this is good news for education. But that's what it means. When they say the new vocations, they're saying that we need to make the education system more vocational. The education system needs to prepare people for jobs. That's the first argument. The second argument, so what makes it new, is that the nature of work, because of the knowledge revolution, we can't just prepare people in the old way with the old reading, writing, arithmetic. People need to learn new, higher order skills, and they need to have more education. Right? And so that's the education gospel. That's the education gospel that they're speaking about, and that is the new vocationalism. So that gave you an idea of what is this new plus vocationalism?
Yes.
Is it a little bit clearer? So those are from your first paragraphs. That is directly out of Grubb.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, Grubb, fortunately or unfortunately, goes into a lot more detail. Because I was reading the early debates about the new vocation by people like Bates and them, and the spin, etc. That I had a phrase that come up in a very different context back in the 1980s. The book that I was reading was 84, and I discovered Grubb and Lazaron were writing about this in 1979 already. And the debate is actually about how education and the economy should be linked. And it was linked to Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan then coming into power. And they were saying that skills need to support the economy. Okay? And that's so what they were saying then is that there's a skills mismatch. There's a skills mismatch thesis. Now this idea is contested because what they're arguing, similar to what Grubb and them is arguing now, but now of course the new vocationalist has shifted to what Grubb and them was saying. But back in the 80s, they were saying that the 16-year-olds, that the people who are coming out of school, they're not ready for work. And they were saying that there's a shortage also of people in engineering and manufacturing. Now that shift, they're saying there's a shortage of knowledge workers, IT and that kind of stuff. So it's constantly shifting. And they were saying that Britain, this was in Britain, the debate was happening at the time, the Americans also, they had a similar debate. I can't remember what the name of the debate was, but it was a new, I'll get to it, a nation in crisis, a nation at risk. They had a nation at risk document where they were saying the same thing. South Africa said the same thing, is that we need a skills revolution back in 1997. So in different countries, the same debate was taking, and they're saying that our country is falling behind because we don't have enough skills. And so they started to introduce these new qualifications such as the BTEC and the City and Guilds. These vocational qualifications like the NATED were seen as being low status qualifications. Right? They just trained people for work, but they didn't have any higher degree ideas. And they were mostly for people who are post 16 now. What they are now saying is that, for example, I don't know if you've been following the debate around the NCV. They are now saying that the NCV was actually intended for people who have grade 9. And that they should be the people coming to NCV. But what's happening is that many people are coming into the NCV with matric. I said that the reason for that is that the people with grade 9 simply won't cope. Yeah, but we're going to have to see how that pans out. I actually want to do a research project on that sometime. I know some of you want to do a research project on that, whether the grade 9s and the grade 12s, how they coping. Okay. Hello, Jim. Yeah. But now what they're saying is that because there was an academic focus, this is the new vocations back then, because there was an academic focus, what had happened is that there wasn't enough vocational qualifications and it was damaging to the economy. So they're saying we need more teachers, basically. And then they make a distinction between vocational education and vocational training. Right? Training is just training for people for a job. Vocational means that you have broader understanding of the industry. Right? And it happens at college. Training happens at work. Vocational education happens at college. I think that what's happening now, and both of you said this early on, is we're trying to bring together the education and the training aspect into one. Right? So there's that integration. So that was the debate back then. What is a new vocationalism? What is the good? What is the bad? What is the ugly? And then you begin to relate, and then you say, to what extent is this happening at my college?
Applicable.
Or in my subject? How has this impacted on my subject? Is mathematics becoming more vocational? Should it become more vocational? That we'll look at when we look at the neoliberals, etc. Should it be more vocational? What is the impact of this vocationalism been on my students? What has the impact been, right? What's the effect? So Grubb and Lazaron, they say the new vocationalism is, and we had that conversation now. And here are the implications. One of the things that has happened is that now education is more about occupational preparation. My son's girlfriend is studying something called, or she's just finished studying something called surface design. I don't know what it is that she's doing. She spent some time trying to explain to me what it is that she's doing. But it's fascinating subjects. When I met my wife, she was studying municipal administration. I said, what is that? You know, I didn't even know that these qualifications existed. My friend was working yesterday at the food technologist. He gave us what's called Coca-Cola. I didn't know that there was such things. But now suddenly there's all these new qualifications out in a whole lot of different stuff that I didn't understand. When I was young, you were a teacher, you were a doctor, you were an engineer, you were a lawyer, you were a nurse. You know, now there's all these other things that our kids can study for. So it's vocationalism. Now suddenly more people are coming to the college and they're saying, and people are coming there and they want to study for a work. And what is happening in the case of universities, so universities are becoming more differentiated. So you have your academic universities and you have your vocational universities. Did you guys go via the BTech route? How did you guys? I can't remember what the route you guys went. If you went like BSc engineering or because I went the traditional kind of academic route. You know, but that's what everybody did. We went to varsity and we went to go play cards in the cafeteria, etc. And occasionally went to class, but we didn't know what we wanted to do. We decided afterwards. But now there's more differentiation of the universities, and even at places like your academic universities, they're offering more vocationally oriented courses. People are studying marketing and the EMS, the education management sciences, and the dental faculties. Those are the big faculties. Faculties like art and that kind of stuff, not so much. So that's at the universities. At the level of adult education, is much more occupational preparation. So when we're talking literacy training, when I was young, they used to have night schools where they were teaching people to read and write. Now people are sending people into classes where they're teaching people bricklaying and those kind of things. Right? So it's much more occupationally oriented. But there is now an argument that says, yes, but they also need to be able to be literate as well. Right? But literate for what? In TVET, there's also been the shift, but now it's much more overt. So it's not as much, like you said, there's more theory and practical being brought together. But there's also an interesting aspect to what's happening at TVET. Because in the past, what used to happen at TVET is you used to go to TVET and you used to do your theoretical training. And then you used to go to work. Now, people are sending people for theoretical training, but they say you get your practical training at TVET colleges as well. And there's been, and I'll mention in the next slide, there's been an interesting development on that, because one of the things that the new vocation did, I think accidentally, is the apprenticeship system started to suffer. Because people said, no, you go for occupational training, you go to the TVET college, and that's where it ends. So that when people come from the TVET college onto the workplace, they must already be ready to do work. Whereas in the past, with the apprenticeship system, it said, no, people at TVET are still in the process of learning. They're still apprentices. So they do TVET, and then they come to work, and then they get some more TVET, and they go to work, and then they do more TVET. Now the idea is that you'd first do TVET, and then you go work. And so the apprenticeship system started to suffer. And in countries like Britain, in the UK, in South Africa, we're finding it very difficult to rebuild that apprenticeship system again, where people are getting work-based learning. And now suddenly everybody's saying, oh, but we need work-based learning. So in Britain, they brought in modern apprenticeships, and they were struggling to get the people back into the modern apprenticeships. Here we brought in learnerships. We brought in this work-based learning, work-integrated learning that you guys are doing. Colleges are struggling to find placement for students. So that has been part of the shift that has happened at TVET, and you guys can speak about what's been happening at your own colleges. What is your relationship of your college to the workplace? The white paper is the government's document, where the government says this is what we think should happen.
I've seen it.
Strangely enough, none of us have read it. But that's what the government, and there's a section in that where the government started to saying, this is what we think should be happening at TVET colleges. You may want to comment on to what extent that is happening. Are you as lecturers getting workplace experience? Okay. Have they sent you to workplaces already? Have you been, either of you?
Where?
Have they sent you to the workplace to go see what's happening there yet?
Yes, there was something called Wheel, whereby
Yes,
we're supposed through Wheel we're supposed to visit the companies to see what is new on the market, so that we can relate what we did with what is new, so that to be upgraded to deliver what is on the market, so that we can be on the same pair with what the industries are looking for.
Have you been already?
It's been maybe 2 years ago.
For me, I think I'm still in the line because in my college they take only few lecturers each and every year all day. So I'm still in the line.
Yeah. So it's still getting there, but that's an example of how vocationalism works, because you've got to bring the education in line with what's happening at companies. And your students, have they been on work?
Yes.
Yes.
WBE.
Most of them also, sorry? WBE, yes.
Yes, yeah.
So that is an example of vocationalism in practice.
Mm.
And I think there's more or less, in fact, there was a report on this, I think around about 2012. And so then the government started to say, we need to do more of this WBE or WORL, or what's the other word, work-based learning. So it's WBEL. They call it different names, but it's all the same thing as work integrated learning. Do the colleges have people at your college from the CETAs? Education and training, like MERS, CETA and those, do they have offices at your college?
No, we don't have SITA offices in our college, but then we do have particular offices which are working straight with SITAs.
Yes. And so they're supposed to liaise with the CETAs, because in the white paper they said that the idea was that all the CETAs would have an office at all the different colleges. In fact, we were speaking to, so we did some of this research back in 2012, and then we found it in the white paper. And one college, just to give you an example of one college, they actually have a CETA office at the college. Where, so if they want to set people up with learnerships, they want to connect people to jobs, they go to that CETA office. At another college, this company recruits only from the college. So the company doesn't go out and they don't put an advert. They put an advert on the college and they tell the college, look for, we need 5 people. And then the college advertises, and they take some of their best students normally, and then those students go and they set up the interview happens at the college. So it's a much closer relationship between colleges and industry. Right. So that seems to be the route that we've been going, especially in the since about 2013. And maybe a bit before then. I think the debate started in 2011, where they signed an accord called the National Skills Accord, where business committed to placing, I think, 18,000 learners, and I think it was 800 lecturers. So business committed to that, but they've been finding it difficult to do that. So it'd be interesting to hear what is happening at your colleges, and you can maybe work that into your essay. Right. So these are the implications. So it moves more towards occupational preparation. At TVET colleges, it's much more overt that college is there to prepare people for work. Right. And one of the things that you're speaking about now is that there's much more of this work integrated learning happening. Some colleges even, the workplace will actually donate equipment to the college so that people know how to work. So they will give you a brand new Volkswagen, so that when your students come out of the college, they already know how to work on a Volkswagen. They don't have to be retrained at the school. And so some colleges have that, or some colleges, and all of these things they speak about in the white paper. Some colleges use lecturers, guest lecturers from places like Volkswagen, for example, to come and lecture on their programs, so the students can get the latest information on what's happening in that particular industry. All right, so there are all these kind of things that become possible under the new vocationalism, where this ideology says, let's bring industry and the colleges closer together. Linked to the new vocationalism as well, because remember it's new, they're saying that we need to expand education. So there's much more TVET happening now than there was. TVET, when I started out, was about 200,000 people big. That may even be an exaggeration. We're now at about 800,000. So TVET has grown between 2 and 8 times. The bursary, of course, has made it easier, but TVET is much bigger now than what it used to be. The apprenticeship system may be smaller, but TVET itself has expanded. And in fact, much more people are going to school than when we started off. If I remember correctly, when in the 2003, 12%. No, I'm trying to. I lie if I'm talking. I think 18% of people did not go to school at all. Right? We've now knocked that number down to 8%. Right? It used to be that 70% of people had no matric. Now it's 60% have no matric. Okay, so much more people are going to education, not just here, all over the world, in the European countries and in the USA and Canada. 50% of people are at university. They're not even speaking about massive higher education. They're speaking about universal higher education. All right, so these are some of the implications. So this is the good news. There's 4 different people who are pushing this new vocational agenda. One, the job market is pushing it, because they're saying that the occupations require qualifications. Nowadays, you need this credentialism. You need a piece of paper to be almost anything. And in some cases, it's gone out of hand. Like I've now heard, don't tell Lana, I said this. There is now a qualification for you to become a toll packer. Right? So now suddenly you need a piece of paper to do something that you didn't do before. When I was working at another organization, SACWA, so what they were saying is, all of the people were phoning us from municipality, for example, and they were saying, we've got all these people who have got a grade 10, a standard 8, is this equivalent to a matric. So people who have been doing the job for 15 years were suddenly no longer qualified to do the job that they've been doing for the past 15 years. Because of credentialism. A credential is a certificate. So people needed certificates to do something. Also, a lot of mid-level occupations are now becoming professionalized. So you can get a degree in, people have been doing reception work and that kind of stuff, administration. Now, that used to just be a mid-level occupation. Now you can get a degree, you can get the honors, you can get a doctorate in that particular occupation. You can get a doctorate in domestic work. What do they call it? Human ecology. Right? So these are people who organize homes and that kind of stuff. So all these occupations have become professionalized, and there's a certificate structure. So, and they use this in order, and you'll do it in your second essay, in order to weed people out. So that's the one thing. There's new qualifications in the job market. There's a whole lot of new occupations. Jobs that didn't exist before suddenly exist. So now we need people to train people to do these jobs that didn't exist. And even within those jobs, there are new specialisms. My wife is going to see somebody, this is a completely different thing, called a urogynecologist. It's a brand new discipline within, remember there used to be gynecologists? And although the women will know about this, and they were urologists. Now there's a brand new discipline in medicine where urology, which is the study of the bladder, and gynecology, the study of your reproductive system, has combined now to form a new specialism. People now become specialized in dealing just with tires. There's qualification for people working with tires. So within this big block of work, there's this particular specialism. One of the things we worked on was a discipline. There's people who take your blood. Now the nurse who takes your blood, there's now a special kind of nurse called a phlebotomist. Yeah, it took a long time for me to memorize how to say that word. But phlebotomy is a whole new specialism. So within your job, or even within your particular occupations at TVET, there are all new specialisms. So these new specialisms needed new vocational training or education courses, and so they were pushing new vocationalism, right?
Mm.
So that's the one. Students then realized that in order for me to get a job, and so they were also pushing it, I need to get a qualification that will qualify me to do something. So they were starting to say, but we don't just want the qualification. What does this qualification prepare me for? In some of your maths classes, they say, but now how am I going to use this? And so they don't want to know maths for the sake of maths. They're going to ask you, how am I going to do this? Because I need this maths in order to get a job. And so they were also pushing vocationalism. At education institutions, particularly your universities of technology, some of them wanted to get more degrees. So now there are more degrees in vocational courses because the universities of technology are moving to this space. There are more courses because now the colleges and the schools are in competition. There are more vocational courses at schools as well. What am I studying? Kids study something in computer assisted design. I can't remember what they do. Computer assisted design, etc. And so schools also were starting to say, we want to have more vocational training. And so your universities were saying, we also want a piece of that market, right? And then, of course, at the political level, lots of the politicians were starting to push this. They were starting to say, we need more vocationalism so that we can be internationally competitive. We need more vocations so that we can give students opportunities to learn how to work. So there's a whole lot of people, and if you read Grubb, you'll see this is a short summary of what he's saying. There are a lot of people who are saying we need more vocationalism. What Grubb is then saying is Grubb is saying, however, it didn't necessarily work out the way that we wanted it to. And this is the part of the argument that you also have to make. Right. Vocationalism is a good idea, we need to do it. But what in fact has happened? Okay, one, and you can read about this, is there are 4 different versions of vocationalism. There's almost different levels of vocationalism, and you can read up about that in Grubb. The second one is that ironically, there's been a separation from work itself. Because what happened, and this is the time that Grubb was writing, I think he wrote this in the 90s. No, he wrote this in 2009. And there's been a shift since then, I think. But at the time, what has happened is that people were pushing the vocational training onto the colleges, and the workplaces themselves were closing down their training centers. So there wasn't such a close relationship between the school-based systems and the apprenticeships. And now, even now, you'll find out, and this is when you come to the neoliberal view, which you'll do later, that lots of the private training companies are offering things like learnerships, and the colleges have been left out of that deal. Right? So we had a situation, for example, where people were doing the NCV, and they were going from the NCV, they're doing NCV4, then they were going to do the N2, because the N2 got them into the apprenticeship, which is an N2 apprenticeship. So they already had NCV4, which is matric level, and then they went down to an N2, which is a grade 9 level, because they wanted to do the N2 apprenticeship, because that's what got them jobs. Because the colleges and the schools were separated, right? And so there are different mechanisms. What was happening in the school system and what's happening in the college system. Sorry, not the schools. What's happening in the workplace and what's happening in the colleges. These things were going in opposite directions. So you will have a situation where a company will advertise for a training post, and 10,000 people will apply for the training post, including college people. And the college people will have to study what they did at college all over again at that company, and they will have to go through the system because the company's got their own recruitment mechanism and they've got their own training, which is separate from the college. The systems are not speaking to each other. Right. So there's that kind of separation has started to come across. And it says this is what is observed by doing comparative studies, where Grubb in particular has been to different parts of the world to observe this, but that's not known as well. So that's the one effect. So this is the con side. Second side is that equity. We were hoping, or the education gospel was preaching that there would be more equity because people would be trained for jobs, and if you get more education, more people will be able to get a leg up. Problem was that not all the causes are equal. Some causes are more equal than others. Okay. So there were differences between tracks and programs. So some courses, for example, if you went to the vocational track and you had the TVET track, it may not have had the same status as somebody with a matric. So, for example, when it comes to going on to university, you can study engineering for 3 years at the college, but when you apply to do engineering at the university, they will give the matric studying history for 3 years more of an opportunity to do so than a college student, because of different statuses of the program. Right. And even at university level, where Grubb and them are speaking about, some universities have more status than others. So you had your Ivy League universities, particularly in the US and the UK. You had your Ivy League universities. So if you went to Oxford and if you went to Huddersfield, people who are high in Oxford graduate, even if they were doing the same qualification. In fact, yeah, we've done a study. Mike Rogan did a study here in South Africa. If you go to Fort Hare and you go to university and you go to Wits University, if you go to Fort Hare, if you go to Wits University, your chance of getting a job are better than somebody goes to Fort Hare, even if you study exactly the same thing. Right? So there was more access, but the access wasn't necessarily equitable because of the status. And unfortunately, these showed up in your own differences of race, class, gender, language. Right? So you would have more people looking the way we do going to Fort Hare than goes to Wits University. And so it's along the lines of race again. It's along the lines of class. Certain people who earn more money could go to Wits and other people went to Fort Hare. So it is a whole new way of reinventing class. So even though people are studying the same stuff, the system was still being used in order to discriminate against certain people. So whilst the new vocation promised equity, didn't necessarily deliver on equity because that's not what happened in practice. A third thing that happened is that students became credentialists. So they don't see education, they're not necessarily there. This is what Grubb and them observe. They're not necessarily there because they want to learn, because they want a piece of paper. So it becomes paper chasing. Right? So I must get the paper with as little work as possible. I need to learn the stuff so long as I get a good grade. So I don't have to understand the stuff, I just must get a good grade. And so the students start to accumulate facts and they study, etc., and they must pass the exam. Where they understand stuff, that's not really important. And so in the long run, students come out of the new system. They are arguing. There's the potential that some people come out of this new system with better grades, but understanding less. And the colleges then will start to play the game because then they're going to run after the colleges which give them the best grades, not the colleges that give them the best results. And they're going to stay away from the teachers who are strict, and they're going to go to the teachers who are lenient. Because they're not interested in learning, they're in getting that piece of paper. All right. So those are some of the conflicts that have happened, that have arisen about new vocationalism in practice. Oops, wrong one. Currency.
Sorry.
You'll find all of this in Grubb.
Sorry, Tim.
You'll find all of this in Grubb. Do you want to stop?
Yeah. Can I ask maybe there's this one student that didn't switch off their mic. I'm not sure when I'm pronouncing this the name right. Simaka Amkoleng. I think it's the one with a noise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'll try to switch off the mic.
Sorry,
Press Control D. Press Control D. press L and D, and your mic will go off. Did it go off? Probably did. That's why I can't. Okay. So now what's happening is that Grubb then says they are good, and he's saying what is good about the new vocation. And for us, Grubb is, and you can go on your own route. Is that one? People are saying that education is the route forward, right? Not like war, and there are a lot of other things that people could do, and saying to make things and paying lower wages. They're saying no, give more education. That's good. And it has meant that they've been spending more money on public education. So you'll see the benefits in the college. There's the NSFAS bursaries. And so on. And also the goals of education is not just studying history. They're studying a whole lot of other stuff as well. So there's a range of stuff that people can go on. The problems, some of the problems, or besides the ones that I just showed you now, is that sometimes it's over-education on courses. So people are using a fraction of what they know, right? So we're saying that, that this change that is happening, etc. All the colleges, all the cars are now electronic, etc. And now when you have people coming in and they're trying to, they want to learn what the carburetor looks like. They don't know what the carburetor looks like because we thought the carburetor was going to go out of fashion on a car, right? But there are still cars driving around that have carburetors. So we've almost exaggerated the pace at which change is going to happen. Technology hasn't happened. This is the myth part of it. It hasn't happened as quickly as people have said it would. The new vocationalism has exaggerated the impact on economic growth. What's happening in South Africa is that we've got more and more education, but our economy is not growing at the same time. So we thought that more education would mean more people getting jobs, but more education has not meant that more people has gotten jobs. It hasn't been able to absorb the people who got more education. So you have more educated matrics walking the streets than used to be in the past. So in the past, people used to walk around with a Senate 9 certificate, and now they're walking the streets with a matric certificate. That's kind of the thing. That's not 100% true. People actually we've discovered that people with a matric certificate have a better chance at getting a job than people without a matric certificate. That's neither here nor there. But this new vocation, it hasn't been able to meet its promise. And the other thing is that we're saying that education is the key to success, but it's not the only key. So education, for example, create jobs. So we need to look at how do we do job creation? How do we do the other stuff which is not just education? So these are some of the things that he mentions. Right? Maybe interested in the slide over here. And he speaks about the ambiguous consequences and speak about what's actually happening in the new vocation. What is going wrong at the colleges? What's the college's capacity, for example, to absorb vocationalism? First, you need to unpack and you need to discuss this concept of what is the new vocationalism and how it has impacted on my college. There's a balance sheet. There are those who support new vocationalism, and they say that one, the people who support it are saying it's superior to your traditional work-based learning, right? Because it's bringing together theory and practice. And you're not just learning basic skills, you're learning higher order learning skills. The people who are against it, they're saying that there's been education inflation, that people suddenly have to study stuff that they no longer need for the jobs, and suddenly you need pieces of paper to be a till packer. Secondly, they're saying that the people who support it are saying there's a broader approach to skills. It's not just narrow skills, learning how to fix a tire, but understanding what makes tires and what have you. The people who oppose it are saying that yes, that is true, but in practice, lots of the training is too job specific. You're learning how to fix a Volkswagen, and you don't know how to fix a Mercedes-Benz. You don't know how to fix a Datsun. You don't know how to fix an old car. So some of the jobs that we got are too specific, and I'll come back to why that is so just now. 3, the people are saying the pro is there's a potential for equity, right? If more people are getting more education, more people can get jobs, more people have an opportunity. The people who are opposed are saying that, look, but actually what is happening is that people at colleges are not getting the same opportunities as people at school and people at university. So actually there's new forms of inequality happening. And then again, there are people who are saying, but there are expanded options. Now people can study things that we never dreamt of. The people opposed who are saying that is true, but now there's a need for career guidance and people don't know what they want to do because it's all just so confusing. There's so many options, people don't know what to choose. Right? What you would need to do is you need to say there are 2 sides to all these arguments. There's this side and that side. And then using your college experience, say, what do you think of these 2 sides? Support or oppose? Which one do you support? Which one do you think is actually happening at your college? Right? And you can expand these lists and you can make these lists longer if you need to. Now here, this is perhaps the crux. You need to include this in your essay somewhere. 2 forms of vocationalism actually. This is what Grubb and them are arguing. Grubb is saying there's the new vocationalism as advertised, but they're saying that in reality there's another form of vocationalism called hypervocationalism. And in hypervocationalism, they are not training people for vocations. They're not training for people for these expanded 3 R's, etc. What is happening is that in factories, in courses, they are training people for only narrow work skills. They're training you just to do that job. Right? And they're not just training you to do that job, but the work is becoming de-skilled. They train the work that people are sending people out to do as routinized work, as low skills work. Right? They're training people to pack bricks together. But they're not training them how to do brick making and how they're training them just how to weld, but a quick and dirty training.
Is it like when you are training?
They're not training them to become deep welders and how to you know what is all the deep stuff of a welder.
Is it like when you are doing the basics, like they're training about the basics, like maybe skilled what can I say? Maybe
Yes.
they're just giving you the basics, not maybe the real job. Like maybe just to I don't know how to explain.
Yeah, just so that you can do the job. So if, for example, I want to replace a plug, they will give somebody quick train. They won't train them to be an electrician. They'll just train them to fix that plug. Because the thing is, and this is happening especially in certain countries, especially English-speaking countries, is that they want to hire cheap workers. So they want somebody who can do the job. They don't want somebody who's fully trained, who they have to pay more.
Okay, yeah.
So instead of hiring an electrician, they will teach somebody just to fix that plug.
They don't need a qualified electrician.
They don't need a qualified electrician, but they can give them a piece of paper that says they're qualified to do the small part of the job. So instead of, and here's a word that you may have got from Nigel, instead of competence, they're teaching them competencies. So there's a difference of competence training, where people spend years and years learning how to become a good welder. And they teach them competencies. They teach them just how to weld quickly.
Yeah.
And there's a difference between being a welder and knowing how to weld. Right? So there's that kind of stuff where it's not part of them. And they're training low skills regimes. We had sorry?
Semi-skilled training.
Sorry? Skills training, yes.
Yeah, skill training, just to know the job.
Just to know the job. And they're saying that hypervoc is very common, especially in your English-speaking countries. They were building houses in the place where my wife comes from. And when they were putting in the roofs, they got these guys who know how to do the roof, But then they were putting the bolts through the roof, and they didn't know where the beam was. So they kept on missing the beam, and now the roofs have got holes in them all over the show. The guys didn't necessarily understand what they were doing. There are houses that where the cracks started to appear in the houses because they built the house, they got the contract, they trained workers, they could pay them a little bit of money and send them on their way. Because they just train them and they employ them for that short period of time, and then you're gone. Then you must go find another job. And so you're learning all of the skills, but you never really learning your craft. So they're saying that with this hypervoc, instead of people being more skilled, people are less skilled. They have a lot of skills, but they know a lot of skills badly. Okay, so they're learning competencies and not competence in hypervoc, as opposed to what was advertised with the new vocationalism. There's instrumentalist approaches, so you don't have to know how to do mathematics, because what I'm going to use this mathematics for? Right? But real tilers know how to do mathematics. They can invent new stuff. They can use mathematics to say, you know, we can do this thing a different way. But the other people doing hypervoc, they will only say, that's the way that I was taught to do it, and that's the only way to do it. They can't imagine different ways of doing it. Like my cousin works as his electrician, and he will look at the thing and he'll be reading new books, etc. So there's this huge TV up. I don't know if you know Cape Town in Canal Walk. There's this huge TV up. He says he was drunk when he did it. He says it's a stupid job. I was drunk when I did it. But he suddenly found new ways of doing it so that he can build TVs that you can see the TVs from both sides. You know, so there's all kinds of other new stuff that he can do because he has an understanding of mathematics. He knows how the electronics works. He wasn't taught to fix a car. He can actually develop new cars, etc.
Yeah.
And so what the employers want under this new stuff is they want to know, can these people do my job? So not do they have a broad competence and they can learn how to do the job, but are they trying to do my job specifically? And they'll be very upset if your students can't do, if they can't fix their particular car. Right? And the education institutions then become limited to preparation for, I train students for Volkswagen. I don't train mechanics. I train students to work for that particular company. Right? And that would possibly be the case, especially in your private institutions. Right? So whereas you guys are training people for broad competence, and what one of my colleagues called domain-specific learning, where they learn about the whole domain, the companies, etc., are pushing people towards hypervoc. So it's still called the new vocational, etc., but it's a very specific form of education. And one of the things that Grubb and Lazaron are arguing, he says that we need to oppose hypervoc within the colleges so that it doesn't become the way of doing things. But there's a lot of pressure from companies, from business, to make sure that hypervoc happens at the colleges and not vocational preparation. Because the argument would be that in some places they actually don't want trained electricians because they're too expensive. A trained electrician will charge me 350 Rand to change my plug. I can get somebody off the city to change my plug for 50 Rand. But the problem is that then the occupation itself suffers because it's all the short-term training. So that I've spoken about, these are the implications of Grubb. This is why people are pushing the new vocationalism. These are the problems with the new vocationalism. This is his balance sheet of what people are saying for and against. And slide is not necessarily too important. This slide is more important, but you can expand on this slide of saying what are the arguments for and the arguments against. And I put them side by side. So here, traditional work-based versus education. There are two sides to every story. Which side do you support? What is happening at your college? And then there's this notion of hypervoc. To what extent is your college falling into hypervoc? Is your college a new vocational or is it a hypervoc institution?